This is going to be a part 2 to my Jada Pinkett Smith and disingenuous boycotts video. And in the previous video, I explained why Jada Pinkett Smith was being disingenuous. And the reason why she's being disingenuous is because she's saying that there's a lack of diversity, but her reason for saying that there's a lack of diversity at the Oscars is because she has an ulterior motive. And that ulterior motive is because her husband Will Smith starred in the movie Concussion last year, and the movie was not nominated for any acting categories or any categories at all, and most importantly, her husband didn't get a nomination whatsoever. And now we have director Spike Lee coming in saying that he's going to boycott the Oscars for a lack of diversity. I find it very interesting that Jada Pinkett Smith or Spike Lee were not available last year when director Ava DuVernay's film Selma was getting so-called snubbed at the Oscars. Where was their outrage then? I mean, back then, Ava DuVernay's film wasn't nominated for any categories, and there was all this outrage, but we didn't hear a peep from your Jada Pinkett Smith or your Spike Lee. I find it very interesting that these two people decide they're going to show up and talk about there is this lack of diversity at the Oscars. And I look at the history of film, over time, and I find it interesting that people only talk about Oscars being snubbed and a lack of diversity when a film fits a certain narrative. Selma fit the narrative that the Negro was trying to preach to America regarding black people. I noticed there was no outrage in talking about the lack of diversity in film when Denzel Washington made The Great Debaters. And The Great Debaters came out during the time when Barack Obama was being elected. And around this time, we had your black nominees for Oscars, like Barney Sidibe for Precious and Monique for Precious. And no one wanted to talk about The Great Debaters getting snubbed. And I believe the reason they didn't want to talk about The Great Debaters being snubbed was because this film does not fit the narrative the Negro wants to tell regarding the experience of African Americans. No, Precious told the story that the Negro wants to hear and the white liberal wants to preach regarding the Afro-American Negro. But no one said a word, about The Great Debaters. And then a few years later, you have the critically acclaimed Pride. Again, another film that tells a story regarding the Afro-American experience, a positive story, an uplifting story. No talk from these Afro-American Negroes about, a lack of diversity at the Oscars. This film was a great film. No one wanted to talk about it. Nobody wanted to say this film deserved a nomination. But, that's because it doesn't fit the narrative. And I go to Your Black Dynamite, yet again, another film. Everybody says this is a very highly creative film, a very inspired film, a great parody of blaxploitation films. Again, another story that just does not fit the narrative of the Afro-American Negro and the white liberals in Hollywood. No talk of a lack of diversity at the Oscars regarding this film and the beautiful cinematography, camera work, all sorts of technical skills were presented in this film. Yet, no one wanted to talk about this film, and a lack of diversity at the Oscars. Nor did they want to talk about Ava DuVernay's earlier films, like I Will Follow. Now, Sally Richardson Whitfield gives a very powerful performance in this film, and this film is shot, very beautifully, very well done camera work, very well done acting, strong direction. No one wants to talk about a lack of diversity regarding this film. And I'll even go in and talk about films from this year. No one wants to talk about Dope, which came out this year. And this was a film which featured black actors and talked about black culture in the late 1980s. And it was a very powerful film, and it was a critically acclaimed film. Yet, no one wants to talk about a lack of diversity regarding that film. I find it interesting they only want to talk about the lack of diversity regarding films that only fit a certain narrative. They only talk about a lack of diversity when it comes down to films like your Concussion, which was a biopic, your Chirac, which was a Spike Lee film, which was supposed to be some sort of commentary on the violence in Chicago, and Straight Out of Compton, a film which talked about another biopic talking about the rise of the NWA. They didn't want to talk about, the films that I mentioned here when they talk about a lack of diversity, nor did they want to talk about Dope, which came out this year. I just find it very interesting that these Afro-American Negroes, in Hollywood, never want to talk about diversity when it comes down to true diversity in film, and that means telling stories that do not fit the narrative of the white liberal. Whenever a film fits the narrative of the white liberal, then the Afro-American Negro wants to talk about how this is being a diverse film, how this is being an inclusive film, and this is a film that accepts, African Americans and the African American experience. And the irony of that is, you're saying that this is including black people, but the irony is that it's only including black people and accepting of black people when it fits the narrative of the white liberals in Hollywood. But when these films are made that go outside of the narrative of the white liberal, these Afro-American Negro performers like your Jada Pinkett's and your Spike Lee's just can't be found. And that's a profound statement, on African American film and the so-called statement called diversity. When it comes down to diversity, we're seeing that this is not really talking about things being diverse. Now, true diversity would be the ability for filmmakers to make, like Ava DuVernay, to make a human story like I Will Follow, or I think it's Scott Sanders to make a Black Dynamite, or the director of Pride to make Pride, or Denzel Washington to make the Great Debaters, and for there to be room for all of these films, at the box office to find an audience. I find it just crazy that you guys want to talk diversity when films fit a certain narrative and discuss a certain narrative. I don't see anybody getting outraged over Dope, and Dope came out over the summer and was one of the most critically acclaimed films of this year. Nobody has any outrage over that. And Dope was artistically better and much more creative than your Straight Out of Compton, or, Will Smith's Concussion, or The Perfect Guy, the only few black films that came out this year. But they're all outraged over Will Smith not getting a nomination. And last year they were outraged because Oprah Winfrey's pet project, Selma, got snubbed at the Oscars. But indie black filmmakers, make films every year, and they literally get ignored, just like Dope got ignored this year. And these Negroes don't have a single word to say, about outrage. They're not angry. They're not protesting. That shows, truly that they have selective outrage, and they're only outraged because this story fits a certain narrative, and that's the narrative of the white liberals in Hollywood. And the white liberals, want to present a certain narrative regarding African Americans and then preach that as diversity. How is that diversity? Again, these films, truly represent diversity because they tell different stories about different experiences in the African American community. They tell different stories and they tell different tales. And that's what diversity, really should be when it comes down to the African American stories and African American experience. Because I remember, growing up back in the 90s with Robert Townsend and Hollywood Shuffle. Spike Lee was doing his thing, like Do the Right Thing and Mo Better Blues. And then you had the Hudlin brothers doing House Party. And then you had Daryl Roberts producing films like How You Like Me Now. That was diversity. That was unique. That was people presenting different viewpoints and different opinions and different stories regarding the African American experience. But we have this shallow argument, that there's this lack of diversity at the Oscars. Well, we shouldn't be making the Oscars, our barometer for quality, and our barometer for excellence, because that's not the barometer for what makes a great African American film. And they wouldn't know what makes a good African American film. The liberals in Hollywood only know what makes a good film according to them. What we should be doing is following the model that Oscar Micheaux established over a century ago, close to a century ago, regarding film. When Hollywood was out here making films featuring black people as coons, black people as mammies, black people as pickaninnies, Oscar Micheaux decided he was going to make his own films and make films to his own standard. And that's the standard we need to follow, and that's the standard that I follow when I go out here and write books and publish books. I follow what Oscar Micheaux did, and that's some family members even say that I'm just like him in some ways. But I follow that standard because Oscar Micheaux said, look, they're not going to make films that represent us and show us for the diversity of us and show us as human beings. So I'm going to go out here and take my own money, make my own films, and make things to my standard. And that's the standard that we all should follow as black people, and our black performers should follow. We shouldn't be sitting here talking about boycotting the Oscars. Instead, we should be focusing on building a black film industry and focusing on building, creating films and creating jobs for our performers. And I see, people going out here doing that. Like I see with Sally Richardson Whitfield. She's got a film getting ready to come out called Post Life, and I see other people coming out here, with films that need to be, seen and supported by black people. And yes, these films do not follow the narrative of Hollywood. They don't follow the narrative of the white liberal. And those films, really need our support because those stories are giving us the diverse picture of what it means to be African American. They're giving us a unique picture of what it means to be African American. And they're presenting, stories that are outside of that mainstream box. I mean, I believe if Jada Pinkett took her time, money, and resources to, go out here and invest in some of these black filmmakers, it would have more of an impact than anything else. I mean, who cares about the Oscars? Let's make films that tell our stories and are featured to our standard. Who cares about Hollywood? I mean, I look at the Christian community and they don't care about Hollywood. Guys like Kirk Cameron have been out here for years making films and making their money and doing well for themselves. I mean, I look at the Christian community, they said, oh, we don't want to, Hollywood said, we don't want to make Christian films. Christian films don't make any money. You know what the Christian community did? They went out and made their own films, and now they have their own industry. Same thing with many of these foreign filmmakers out here in India and China. They were told, "Oh, we don't want Hollywood doesn't want to make films." They went out and made their own films. I mean, I look at Bruce Lee and the example of him. When he was in America, all he could beat was Kato on the Green Hornet. He became the biggest star when he went back to China and started making films for his own people. And that's the model we need to start following: is to make our own stuff for our own people and by our own people, so that and start supporting our own stuff, because the only way we can have quality films and know what our standard of quality is for us to make our own stuff for ourselves and go out and support our own stuff instead of us trying to take all our resources looking to win some Academy Award, which really is not a standard of excellence when you really think about it, because there are many films that the Academy picked that were supposed to be so critically acclaimed, like Atonement and Shakespeare in Love, that people praised, that people, who go out here and watch these movies say this film is absolute garbage. And there are many performances that won Oscars that people said were so great that people said were garbage too. And then the same thing with these Oscars themselves. They are not a barometer of success. They are not a barometer of quality. Um, I look at many of these Oscar winners and look at the careers they've had after they won the Oscar. I mean, they literally fell off the map. I can point to 8, 9, 10 different actors who went out here and won an Oscar and disappeared. So, what does winning an Oscar mean in the long run? It's just like Sid Field, the author of screenplays, said. He said, you know, winning an Oscar doesn't mean anything. That it's just a popularity contest, and you don't write screenplays to win Oscars. You write screenplays to get films financed, to get screen financed, and to get a script sold. That's why you write a screenplay. You don't write them, to win an award, because awards have no value whatsoever. Again, it's a popularity contest. All an Oscar means is somebody is the most popular actor. It does not mean that someone is the best actor in their craft. It does not mean that somebody has the best skills, nor is it a barometer that says somebody's going to have the best career, because people like Harrison Ford and Cary Grant have gone on to have better careers than many of the Oscar winners of their generation. So that should not be our standard whatsoever. Our standard, again, should be us making films for us and, producing quality material that we believe is going to tell our stories and talk about our experience and talk about our culture and represent, the commentaries we want to make in society. Because I look at, all these black entertainers out here, your Oprah Winfrey's, your Jada Pinkett's, your Will Smith's, your Tyler Perry's. These people have the money to go out here and make some great films, but instead they would rather sit there and wait for somebody else to acknowledge them, and they want to get that approval from these white liberals in Hollywood So they don't want to go out here and tell the stories that need to be told. They don't want to have the backbone of the filmmakers who make films like these and make the statements about the black experience. They don't want to go out here and do that. No, they're still waiting for some white liberal in Hollywood, the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences, to pat them on the head and tell them how great they truly are. And that's just not what filmmaking is all about. Again, I go back to Oscar Michaud, who said, "Look, I'm not going to let you, create the standard for what I'm supposed to believe is black. Your standard is telling me I'm supposed to be a coon, I'm supposed to be a criminal, I'm supposed to be a savage, but that's not who I am." I mean, and that's what he did with films like The Homesteader and many films like that. He didn't make films to the Hollywood standard. He made them to his standard, and he should be highly more regarded than he is because I look at the history of black film, and we've never really followed the standards of Hollywood. Um, I look at guys like Melvin Van Peebles who went out here and made Sweetback, um, and started the entire black film industry. He wasn't looking for the approval of white people. He was actually looking for the support of black people, and he was actually going out and trying to get help from black people. And again, if it wasn't for Bill Cosby, giving him the money, $50,000, he wouldn't have been able to finish Sweetback and usher in this industry and the marketplace and establish the marketplace that we all are watching today, because that was all done with Melvin Van Peebles' own money. He put his own money on the line. So we've always put our own money out here and made our own projects because no one else is going to make our projects. No one else is going to support our projects but us. No one else acknowledges our own projects. So we are the ones who make our own stuff. So that should have been our platform. And I look at the whole year that we lost, um, regarding, since the Selma snub, and that should have been the gears we should have been putting into place. But instead, we get Jada Pinkett, sitting here talking about she's going to stay home for the Oscars when she should have been out here, you know, putting her money and her time behind helping out some of these indie black filmmakers or some of these screenwriters like myself in getting our projects up off the ground. Because again, it is not about winning some award. It is about us getting our stories out there and presenting our viewpoint on a platform and creating our own platform for ourselves. Because again, the tools are there. The tools are right there in front of us. I mean, I looked at what Ava DuVernay did with I Will Follow. With $50,000, she made this film for 50 grand, and she got distribution in places like the Magic Johnson Theater. It may not have been for months on end. May have been for just a week or two, but her film was seen at the Magic Johnson Theater. And we have the tools, all around us to make this. I mean, we have social media like YouTube. We have streaming like Amazon Prime. We have, numerous services to get films out there on the market to people. We don't have to use the Hollywood system. People don't use the Hollywood system anymore to get distribution. We now have a whole host of areas to get films to people. So we don't need them anymore. And these venues make money, because I looked at how I Will Follow. When it's limited release, they made their money back. Ava DuVernay made her money back on this film. So there are tools and resources for us to use. And the sad part is, we want to talk about a lack of diversity, but the true lack of diversity comes when when African Americans regards the stories that get promoted, the stories that get supported, and the way we are seen on screen. Because again, if we look at all the films that they want to talk about were snubbed, they all fit the narrative of the white liberals in Hollywood, and they all tell the exact same stories that this white liberal in Hollywood has been wanting to hear ever since the beginning. The biopic about the, legendary black person, the stories of either the slave stories or the stories that feature the stereotypes, like your Straight Outta Compton, which feature your thugs and your black brutes, your Jezebels, your mammies. This is the stories that they consider a lack of diversity, and this is not a lack of diversity. these films that didn't get any press or play, this is a lack of diversity. This, truly tells a story of us not supporting what we need to support. And this is the story that really needs to be told, regarding African Americans in film, because we need to start looking, outside of this box of these white liberals in Hollywood and their viewpoint of African Americans in film, and they talk about a lack of diversity. Um, you know, just putting a black person up who still tells the same story that has been told again and again regarding African Americans. To me, that's not diversity. When I look at that, I say that's not diversity, because true diversity is us, telling those different stories from different viewpoints, different experiences, and different perspectives. That's what I call, real diversity, because that type of diversity is the type of diversity that makes people think, makes people take a look at themselves, take a look at their community, take a look at their experience. And that's what good films do. They make a commentary on society. They make people look at the world from a different perspective. They make the people look at different stories, different people, different expressions. And that's what we really need when it comes down to African American film. Um, this video is gone, a bit long, but this is a subject I am very passionate about. I have a very good understanding of it. And when I hear people like Jada Pinkett talking about a boycott of the Oscars, when when she should be out here taking action, it really shows how hypocritical she is and how selfish she is. Because this is not just about her. This is about all of us, and presenting our stories and our experiences, because winning an Oscar really is not important. As I said before, we have the author of screenplay, Sid Field, telling you that this is just a popularity contest, and we need to be focused on a bigger picture and a broader picture when it comes down to the African American image. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe.